Hello everybody and welcome back to the Blue Snot channel. Today I am back with another power rankings as we will be ranking all 23 teams from the MLS match week number 2, and this time I'm going to try to make this video shorter, mainly because what happened with the review video and how it took 48 minutes to make that video, and I was actually kind of surprised that some of you were actually think that it was kind of exciting, considering the fact that it was just super long video. And I just thought that, what, might as well make this one a little bit quicker. I will of course promise you guys that this one won't be like over 30 minutes. So yeah, without further ado, let's actually begin, and we're gonna start in the bottom as usual. And this team dropped 2 spots from last week, and I'm actually going to put number 22nd too here, because both of these teams is pretty much the same reason why they are where they are, and that of course is the Rapids, who of course moved down 2 spots from last week, and the Revs, who moved up 1 spot from last week. And for Colorado, they obviously concede that late goal that lost them the game, and for the Revs, obviously they got a huge 3 points, and they got that goal literally in the last kick of the game. And if the Revs did not score that goal, Chris Tierney did not put that free kick away, and Tim Howard would have done a much better job saving that free kick from Chris Tierney, the Revs would have stayed in the cellars, and Colorado probably would just drop down 1 spot. But unfortunately for the Rapids, they lost that one. I had to put them in the cellar, and the Revs, for this week only, or maybe for these next couple of weeks, if they start to get things going, they might not be in the cellar and may not be in this bottom row for a very long time. They can start a run, but still, I really doubt that both of these teams is going to, really be up around here unless they make a very crazy kind of run, because both of these teams are by far 2 of the worst teams in MLS. But yeah, next up in the 21st position, and this team dropped 1 spot from last week, and that is Montreal. And for Montreal, it's pretty much the same story. They lost in their game, and just like the Rapids did, they lost that game because of a late goal. And unlike the Rapids, they lost that game with a late goal thanks to a penalty that they conceded. And it probably is even a more harder pill to swallow for this loss for Montreal than it is for the Rapids, because they concede a penalty, and also the fact that they hit the bar 3 times in that game. And even though of course they came back from going down 2-0 in this game against the Columbus Crew, they probably should have got at least a draw out of this. And it was a very unlucky result, but unfortunately I just had to move them down a spot. And have they not conceded the penalty, I would have probably moved them up here in the 4th row and maybe put them at the same spot that they were a week ago. So Montreal of course in that 21st spot, and in the 20th spot, and also moving down 2 spots from last week, is DC United. And actually I don't know why I put the full name. I usually only put like the first 3 letters, but yeah, DC United moving down 2 spot. They of course lost to Atlanta 3-1, and that performance against Atlanta was nowhere near as good as they were last season, where for some reason last season they just have Atlanta number. And I still can't understand how in the world does this team, that I know for a fact that this team is definitely better than the DC United of last season, and how they lost to Atlanta, and how they just completely look overmatched in this game. So it feels really, really strange. But they did lose that game 3-1, and yeah, that's why I decided to put them down 2 spots in this rankings. And in the 19th position, staying in the same place as last week, is FC Dallas. For FC Dallas, they are one of the 5 teams this week that did not play, so I didn't really need to move them. None of these teams that is below them or above them really kind of like made a lot of big moves, or they had a big win that I have to like jump over FC Dallas or maybe move them down or move them up 1 spot. So yeah, FC Dallas is gonna stay in the same place. But yeah, next up, and this team moved up 8 spots, or not 8 spots, I'm sorry, I was getting a little bit too excited for a second, but they actually moved down 4 spots, and I'm pretty sure Minnesota fans was kind of excited the fact that I decided to move them so high, but they only moved 4 spots up in this power rankings, and like I said, it is going to be Minnesota United. For the Loons, obviously there are good news and bad news after today when I make the power rankings. The good news is they won against Orlando City. Adrian Heath, of course, beat his old team, and they got a massive victory. They bounced back after losing in their first game of the season against San Jose, and yeah, it was a very impressive game for them, even though they were playing against Orlando City. That is a squad that is kind of like injury riddled. It's still a very impressive win on the road against Orlando City. But the bad news for Minnesota is that they just announced today that Kevin Molino has suffered a torn ACL, and he's going to be out for the rest of the season. I mean, with Molino now out for the season, that is going to be another player, another star player that is going to be right there on the injury list for Minnesota, that they just do not want to add anymore. I mean, you know, they already have Sam Cronin that is still recovering from his injury. You know, Dan Lottie also is out for a couple of weeks, and now Kevin Molino is going to be out for pretty much throughout this whole season with a torn ACL, and I'm certainly wish him the best of luck and certainly a speedy recovery. But this is a huge blow for Minnesota, because now really they just don't have anybody else left that can really score for them except for Christian Ramirez. And I said in the preseason where I said that if Minnesota is just going to clearly rely on Christian Ramirez to score them the goals, then they are not going to go anywhere near the playoff spot and probably be in the cellar. And it looks like now they just have no choice at all because all their star player is out. And yeah, Christian Ramirez, he's gonna have to try to carry this team on his back, and you know, we'll see how Minnesota will do. But certainly this is really crushing loss for Minnesota, the fact that they lost Molino to a torn ACL injury, and like I said, I wish him a speedy recovery. But yeah, next up, and this was the biggest loser of this week, and it shouldn't come with no surprise, moving down 8 spots from last week's ranking is RSL. And like I said, it shouldn't come as a big surprise because they got absolutely destroyed at home by LAFC. I mean, you know, the defense just had absolutely no answer for Diego Rossi and Carlos Vela and a couple of the supporting cast for LAFC. And yeah, it was an absolute embarrassing loss for RSL, and I'm really hoping for RSL that, you know, that loss against LAFC is just one of those ones where, you know, they just had a bad day in the office. And I definitely know that RSL is better than that. I definitely know that RSL can definitely be well, the best team in the league, and how their young players is gonna definitely show up. But so far, you know, in that game against LAFC, they clearly didn't show up in that game, and they just got completely ripped apart by that really strong and talented LAFC attacking force. So yeah, they are the biggest loser of this week as they dropped down 8 spots from last week. And next up in 16th, this team also dropped down but they dropped down only one spot this week, and that is Chicago. And the reason why I decided not to drop them down even more, even though they lost 4-3 against Sporting KC, is that at least they gave it a fight in this game. They almost pulled off a miraculous comeback and even got all 3 points out of that game with them scoring 3 goals in a span of 12 minutes. But unfortunately for them, after they score that 3rd goal, after Nikolic puts away his 2nd goal and the 3rd goal for the Fire, they immediately conceded literally about 90 seconds after they got that goal. And you know, Sporting KC, of course, went on to win this game with Gutierrez scoring another one in the 86th minute. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely a frustrating loss because for Chicago, they thought they potentially had not only rescue a draw, but potentially getting all 3 points, even though they didn't really play that well in this game. But unfortunately, it wasn't to be the case, and they dropped down 1 spot from last week rankings. And in 15th place, this team moves up 1 spot from last week's ranking is the Union. Philly is one of those 5 teams that did not, of course, but did not, of course, play in last week's game. So yeah, I decided to move them up 1 spot because a couple of these teams, like Chicago, RSL, and a couple of the team around them kind of lost, so might as well just kind of like move them a spot up. So yeah, the Union's going to be in 15th, and in 14th, this is the 2nd biggest loser of this weekend, and I think this is the 2nd week in a row they dropped down the 2nd most in this power ranking is Portland, who dropped down 6 spots from last week's ranking. And really for the Timbers, I mean, yeah, 4-0 loss to the Red Bulls. They were playing a Red Bulls team that didn't even start their ace team in that game. And, you know, I mean, the Timbers did sort of play well in that game, but it was just a combination of the attack really kind of like sputtering and didn't really score any goals to try to get the Timbers back into the game after they were down 1-0. And also the fact that the defense once again was hot garbage and basically decided to show up like they did against LA Galaxy. And yeah, you know, I said it before, if they showed up, if that defense play like that against LA Galaxy, they're going to get destroyed by the Red Bulls, no matter if the Red Bulls are playing their 1st team or 2nd team. And it turns out the defense did exactly that. And, you know, Timber, of course, will be dropping down to 14th position. And really, if this Timbers team, if Giovanni Cervarisi does not figure out this defense, and if they do not get any more defender in probably in these next couple of weeks and potentially in the summer transfer window, they are doomed, okay? They are not going to make the playoffs. There is just no way this team is making the playoff with that kind of hot garbage kind of defense. So yeah, but either way, next spot in 13th position and also losing 1 spot from last week is the Galaxy, who lost to NYCFC 2-1. Although I'm not gonna really put LA really like, I'm not gonna move them really far down the power rankings even with that loss, mainly because I thought they didn't play very well in that game, but at least in the second half when they did get one back, they definitely showed that desire and certainly showed that fight to NYCFC that they, of course, can potentially come back into this game. And, you know, there were moments in that second half where the Galaxy almost got that equalizer and almost came out of Yankee Stadium with a point, but unfortunately that wasn't the case, and really that hope kind of got destroyed when Ashley Cole basically got sent off for a second yellow card, and it was just a really silly sending off from Ashley Cole, who just gives the ball away, and David Villa basically pounds on it, and then he pulls down Villa, and that was clearly a yellow card. There is just no discussion whatsoever. So yeah, for the Galaxy, they moved down one spot. Next up, this team also moves down one spot, but they did not play this weekend. And that, of course, is my Quakes, who, of course, didn't play this weekend. And I really don't need to explain any more about why they kind of moved down a spot. It's kind of similar to what happened with FC Dallas and Philly, and how teams around, some of the team around them actually won, some of the team above them actually won, so I had to like make room and move them down one spot. But if next week when they go to Sporting KC, and if they can get a win or a draw in that, then I'm pretty sure I'm gonna definitely move them up into the top 10 in this power rankings. But for now, they are going to be sit in 12th, and they lost a spot and finishing in 11th place, and this team moves up 4 spots from last week. And that, of course, is Vancouver, who got a very impressive win against Houston Dynamo away. They got a 2-1 win against them at BBVA Compass Stadium, a place that, you know, is just really, really hard to get all 3 points. And Houston, I think, with that loss was actually like their first loss in like almost a year or something like that. I don't remember last year that they actually have lost a game at home. So yeah, it was a very impressive victory from Vancouver, and also a very vintage kind of Vancouver performance. I mean, the way that they play against Houston and how they sit back and hit teams on the counterattack, and even the second goals that they score by Brett Shea, I mean, that was just so typical of Vancouver. That was classic Vancouver, and that was the Vancouver that we know last season, and the reason why they made it to the playoffs. So, you know, fair play to the Whitecaps as they move up 4 spot. And speaking of that game between Vancouver and Houston, the team that, of course, lost that game, Houston, is going to move down 3 spots from this power rankings. You know, they obviously made a huge jump last weekend after beating Atlanta, but unfortunately they are moving back in the rankings because they did lose this game, and you know, they weren't really clinical enough in this game. I mean, they played a very good game. I think you could argue the game against Vancouver, they played just as well as they did against Atlanta. But the problem in this game is that nobody can finish for Houston, other than Albert Elise, who of course scored a goal, but nobody can finish for Houston. They had so many chances to at least get a draw in this, and they failed to do that. So because of that, I had to move them down, and they of course moved down 3 spot. Meanwhile, in 9th place, and this is another team that moved down a lot, and one of the biggest loser in the power rankings, and that of course is Orlando. Now, I said last week that, you know, I was kind of like being a little bit harsh on Orlando because I didn't realize that they had so many injury on their team, and I thought it was just a pretty big kind of, it was kind of disappointing that they did not, of course, get a draw against DC United. And this weekend, I decided to do the same thing, but I have a different reason why they moved down so far down. And the reason, just one word: Minnesota United at home. Well, actually, that was 3 words, but yeah, they lost to Minnesota. You know, you cannot lose to one of the worst teams in the league at home. And I don't care if Orlando City has a kind of B squad coming into this game. The fact that this was a big opportunity for you to get something going and, you know, trying to brush off that draw against DC United, and they didn't do that, and now they have dropped their first 2 games. Well, they haven't dropped their first 2 games, but the first 2 games they didn't pick up a lot of points and only picked up 1 point, and dropped like 5 points from their first 2 home games this season. This is definitely not looking good for Orlando City. And like I said before, this really puts a lot of pressure on not just Jason Kreis, but also when the squad does get back to full strength. Because if they don't perform when the squad goes back to full strength, then Jason Kreis is going to get sacked. And he is going to get sacked sooner or later. He won't get sacked like literally near the end of the year. He might get sacked like in the middle of the season if this team does not perform. And so far in this all-in year, Orlando is off to a really, really slow start. And certainly this is not looking good for them coming into the long term. But like I said, they are a team that is kind of like injury riddle and stuff like that. And certainly, like I said, I'm hoping that once they get their full strength back, this team will start performing again. But seriously, you just cannot lose to Minnesota. I mean, nobody lose to Minnesota whenever Minnesota that is on the road. Well, actually last season, that's not true. I think Minnesota actually got a road win against Atlanta, and then I forgot what was the other team that got a road wins. But yeah, I mean, not a lot of teams get nothing out of the game whenever Minnesota is in town. And you know, if there is going to be at the end of the year, and how if Orlando City is going to be they're going to look at the standings and say that, you know, they're only 1 point out of potentially maybe moving up to 3rd or 4th place. They're going to look back at this Minnesota game and say that they should have won that game. And if they would have won it, they would have been like in 3rd place and stuff like that. But yeah, anyway, in 8th place, and this team moves up 5 spots from last week, and it is the Red Bulls. And I pretty much mentioned this already. The Red Bulls, of course, with an impressive 4-0 win against Portland. And I'll tell you what, if there is any team out there that has a very kind of good kind of B team and have a very talented young players on that team, it has to be the Red Bulls. They have a lot of good young talent. And if there is a guy that is besides Oscar Pereira for FC Dallas can, you know, utilize his young players in these MLS game, it has to be Jesse Marsch. I mean, Jesse Marsch 100% believe in his young guys. He trusts his young guys to get some result out of the bigger teams in the MLS, and they did exactly that. So fair play to Jesse Marsch and fair play to the Red Bulls, and you know, good luck tomorrow against Tijuana. I'm really hoping that they, of course, move on and become the first team in the MLS to move on into the semifinal of CCL. Meanwhile, in 7th place, and this, of course, was the biggest mover of this weekend, and again, shouldn't be any surprise, and that, of course, is LAFC. I mean, you've been kind of wondering when exactly am I going to put LAFC, how big of a move that I decided to put them. Well, I decided to move them up 9 spot because they literally did a 5-star performance against RSL. They completely destroyed them. It was a Diego Rossi and Carlos Vela show on full displays, and you know, if you're an LAFC fan watching that game against RSL, that must be a joy to watch. I mean, that was just such an incredible performance by LAFC, and yeah, they deserve to go all the way up to the top 10 and move 9 spots in this power ranking, almost move up halfway in the power rankings table. So yeah, in 6th place, and this team moves up 3 spots from last week, and that, of course, is Atlanta. Atlanta, of course, got a much-needed victory against DC United, and that game against DC was the Atlanta that we know from last season. You know, the front three for Atlanta, Miguel Almiron, Joseph Martina, and Hector Villalbar all scored, and all of them kind of contribute in this game. I think Almiron was probably my man of the match in that game because he was involved with 2 of the goals. And also a shout out to Julian Gressel in that game. I know I didn't mention him in my review show, but he also was involved, I think, with 2 of the Atlanta goals. So yeah, shout out to Julian Gressel with that incredible performance, but Miguel Almiron was by far the best player in that front three, and certainly was back to what we know of him when he of course was just absolutely unstoppable last season. And if Diego Valeri last season didn't go on an absolute tear in terms of goal scoring, where he scored like 8 straight games or 9 straight games, he probably would have won the MVP. So yeah, it's a good win for Atlanta as they move up to 6th place. And this team didn't play this week, and they didn't really move anywhere, and that of course is Seattle. Not a lot of explanation for me to say that they didn't really move up or down, because they have an off week. And also good luck to Seattle when they go to Chivas Guadalajara to play in that CCL match. And certainly this will really test Seattle, and really this is probably the biggest game for them this season, even though it's kind of like early on, because they've been saying that they want to focus fully on CCL, and now they of course have a 1-0 advantage against Chivas, and it's going to be interesting to see if they can get the job done in the I think tomorrow's game against Chivas. I'm not sure if they play tomorrow or Wednesday, but yeah, good luck to them in CCL. Hopefully they move on. But now in the 4th position, and this team moved up 2 spots from last week, and that of course is Columbus. And have they not won that game, I probably would have put Columbus in the same spot, or maybe even moved them down, because they blew a 2-0 lead, and they in some way kind of got lucky in this game, because Montreal just gifted them a penalty literally in the last minute of the game, and that the fact that Montreal literally hit the post 3 times. So yeah, I mean, it's a good victory against Columbus as they continue to move up in the table. And yeah, meanwhile in 3rd place, and this team also didn't play this weekend and basically are not moving anywhere, is going to be TFC. And once again, like I said, with Seattle and the Red Bulls, good luck to them against Tigres. And that is probably a match that I'm definitely really looking forward to, because that match between TFC and Tigres, these are 2 heavyweighted kind of team going head to head each other. TFC of course won the first leg, but Tigres of course has the away leg. So for TFC, they got to be careful not to concede a goal in this game, because if they do concede a goal in this game, that means that they could be out if they don't score another one. They could be out if they lose 1-0 in this game. But certainly best of luck for TFC. Hopefully they can make MLS proud and really kind of quiet those kind of Liga MX kind of haters and troll that always say MLS is not a competitive league at all. But yeah, in 2nd place, and this team didn't move at all in the power rankings, and that of course is Sporting KC. And for Sporting KC, they got a 4-3 win against Chicago, a very crazy 4-3 win. And I think that if they have not got a win in this game, I might think about, I probably would have moved TFC up a spot and Sporting KC down 1 spot, because they look comfortable in this game until the second half. I mean, I don't know what happened in the second half for them. They literally allowed the Fire to come back in the game, and they even went down 3-2 at one moment, but thankfully they got 2 late goals in the last 10 minutes of the game to make sure they seal all 3 points. Certainly good resilience by those Sporting KC players to just immediately respond after you completely bottle a 2-0 lead in a span of 12 minutes. But the bad things for Sporting KC is that, they give up 3 more goals in this game. That means that now they have given up 5 goals in the last 2 games, and I'm pretty sure Peter Vermees is not going to be happy about that, because he's always a manager that believes in defense first, and this defense from Sporting KC looks nothing like it was from last season. So yeah, hopefully they'll figure that one out. And then finally in the top spot, and this shouldn't be a surprise, as they of course retain their top spot for another week, and that of course is NYCFC, who of course won 2-1 against the Galaxy. You know, it was a pretty good win for them. They pretty much just kind of like, I would say that they kind of cruised through this game, but they did kind of had some nervy moment in the second half when they kind of decided to let the Galaxy come back into this game, and had a couple of moments where the Galaxy could have easily equalized, but they did very good job on the defensive end to not allow that, and they potentially just cruised their way through a victory after Ashley Cole got sent off. So yeah, NYCFC stays in that top spot in the MLS Power Rankings. And yeah, that of course is pretty much this week power ranking done and dusted. Obviously there has been a couple of changes. You know, it's been a crazy week in MLS, and you saw how a couple of teams getting big results and a couple of surprise teams that, you know, weren't expected to win, but win anyway, moved up a couple of spots. So it's good to see that, and let me know in the comments below, what do you think of these power rankings? Which team do you think I put them way too low, and which team I put them way too high? And do you agree with the biggest loser and the biggest kind of winner in this power rankings that I have? And yeah, make sure you guys leave a comment below, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.